Hello there, and welcome to this video, FileMaker Learner. I am here to teach you about FileMaker. My name is Matt Petrowski. I'm the editor over at ISO FileMaker magazine, and in this video, we're taking a look at the topic of filtering value lists. We've got a great database started, and we've got a lot to learn, so stick with me. We'll be on my desktop in a second. All right, so what do we have for today? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at something that is seemingly very complicated for new FileMaker learners. In fact, learning how to get a value list to show what you want to show is probably one of the most confusing things in FileMaker because it's just sort of elusive when you're learning FileMaker. So if you'd like to follow along, which I suggest you do. I'm using a copy of FileMaker 16. You're going to be able to either follow along by choosing a new solution, or if you don't want to rebuild what we already have, down in the comments, I have a link of the file that I'm going to be using. Now, if you're just finding this video for the first time on YouTube, and you're interested in taking a lot of these courses in sequence, just click on the icon or the name of the channel, ISO FileMaker Magazine, somewhere on the page. That will take you to my channel page, and there you'll find all of the different playlists where all of these videos will be in sequence. I've had a few people ask about that. All right, so let's head into the file. The file that we've been working on is this one right here. It is called well, I called it relationships because it was introduced at the point in time that we were learning about relationships. And we started with a very basic relationship where we had a given person attending a given event. And through discourse, we've actually come to the point where, as I show my manage layouts, go back and refer to that video where we're always going to be using this particular dialog in order to get to our other layouts quickly. As a developer, I always like to see what's going on behind the scenes, so I use the manage layouts in order to open multiple windows that allow me to see the data. You can do the same with the file that you download. Now, as we learned, one of our objectives is to have a canonical point of reference for entities, for data, if you will. We have absolutely, as you can see down here at the bottom, we have two people in our database, and working with a simple structure is always really nice to do because it's very easy to break down and understand. We've got a join table now in between these from the standpoint of a structural standpoint where we only ever want to have one of any one of these given events. And so we've arranged this so that the join table joins between the people and the events, the attendance of those individual people. So what we are left with now, as I close the manage layouts, is we are left with a conundrum. The problem is, as we learned in the previous lesson, the data that is showing right here, when we go into layout mode in this portal, and our portal is our primary display mechanism for not just related data, but pretty much anything that we want to display. Look up virtual lists. You'll find that you can use a portal to display whatever you want, however you want. Very powerful. But what we're learning in this situation is that this name field is not actually in the attendees table. So the attendance table here has nothing but IDs currently, two foreign keys and a primary key, which is not currently being used. The name is actually coming from the events table. And there it is right there. And we really only want to have one of any one of these. As I sort this, we want to have 2016, 17, 18, 19. So this is the part that I really like about FileMaker. This is where you get to get into the nitty-gritty and the details and start to implement your user interface. How are you going to solve these problems? And it happens in your solution all the time. You're basically going to be asking and answering questions, some of which may be hard to answer, but we're going to answer one of them today. That is, how do we actually provide the ability for the user to add a new event to their table or to their attendance? So for example, I want to have let's say a drop-down list with a little plus icon where I can actually add the event. Well, we've come to a point where we know how to create a related value list, and if we start to do that right away, the problem is we're going to present all of our values. So let's go ahead and do that really quickly. We're going to go into the File menu, and we're going to go to Manage and Value Lists. And as that comes up, we're going to create a new value list. We know that no matter what, we're going to need a value list. Now, I'm going to call this Not Attending. And what we're going to find out is that FileMaker will allow me to have this named here using this word not, but we're going to find out that it won't when I try to name a table occurrence as such. Now, I can use values from a field, which is what I'd like to do. I can use the values from any of the events table occurrences. Now we can see here that I've got this delete and this delete people and the event. So I have two actual instances of the actual events. And if you've followed along in this series and you know that my naming convention, the last word in a table occurrence always is the same name as the base table. So this delete events table occurrence, I know it's referencing the events table. This event, I know it's referencing the events table. So whatever naming convention you use, I highly suggest you put the base table name in there. I prefer to have it be last. Last course of action, we can always choose Manage Database and come into our graph and reference it whenever we're trying to understand what the heck we're doing or what we're wiring up. So this is my main collection of table occurrences. Currently, I would call this graph a pure graph. There's nothing on the graph that is related to my user interface, but that's what we're going to be adding today. So distinguishing between what's pure, meaning your actual data structure, versus what is used for your user interface, it becomes a little bit important as your graph continually grows. So as I zoom out here, we can take a look at the value list we're going to add. Let's just grab it from the events, and we're going to, in this scenario, remember, with a value list, as a new FileMaker learner, you're probably going to be tempted to say, I want the user to choose from the name. But that's not what we want to do. Remember, we are joining these two tables based on the ID value, not based on the name. So we have to choose that the values that we use from the first field is the ID of the event. Then we select that we also want to display values from a second field, and that's the name field. Now, as I stated in an earlier video in this series, or actually the series before, FileMaker really only has a few display widgets that will actually allow you to display the second name but show the first value. And that's going to be a pop-up menu, I believe, checkboxes, and radio buttons. A drop-down list, unless they've changed it, it may not show that, but you can always play with it. Now, what we're going to do right now is we're going to include all values. We're just going to leave that option set. We are going to choose this option of show values only from the second field, because really the only thing that makes sense to a user is the name. The ID, as the developer, that we know needs to go into the join table is what makes sense to us, but the name is what makes sense to other users. So we have our value list. Now what's the next critical thing that we need in our database? Well, now we need something that the user can select from. Well, currently on my layout, I could put the drop down right here, but the problem is FileMaker, with this row being the addition row, when FileMakers allow creation of related records is turned on, it will continually move down until it is obscured and no longer visible. It will be down here under the bottom and it will be hidden. So in the FileMaker user interface, we always have to come up with methods in order to display things, and I'm just going to use a global field. Now, why a global field? A global field because, as you recall from a previous lesson, a global field is not global and universally the same to all users. It's global in nature to the table, but it's local for all of the users, meaning user A can select something in a global and user B can select something and it'll be totally different. It is disconnected from client to client. So we go into our defined database and we are going to create the field. Now, in advanced FileMaker development, I'm just going to give you this as a tip. In advanced FileMaker development, you can do this. You can create a dedicated table called globals that intentionally stores nothing but globals, and then you can use those in your other tables and through relationships. It's an advanced thought process, but you have to answer the question of, as my database grows, how much do I want to commingle my user interface with my actual fields? Because that's what's going to happen right now. As of right now, this table is what I would call clean. It has only fields related to the storage of the data that's important to my solution. But I'm going to add a new field now, and it's going to be selected underscore event. And I'm now going to say it's going to be a text field. I'll create that, and then I'll click on my options. I am going to go in and I'm going to choose this option of use global storage, because according to my conventions that I like to use, or FileMaker standards, I know that it's global in nature because I used an all capital letters in order to make this. So this is going to be the field that from client to client to client, it can be completely different, but it's also going to be the way that the user selects from the values. So we say okay, and we'll put that on the layout. Well, FileMaker will put that on the layout for us. All right, I do not want the label. I am going to move it above the actual portal. I'm going to scroll up. Actually, I'll need to zoom out here, and we will hide some of these things that we do not need. In the inspector, in the fourth area right here of the data tab, that's where I can select the control style, which I am going to choose. Again, the drop-down list, you can always test it out. I don't know that it will work, but I'm going to choose a pop-up menu because that's going to be the way that I'm going to allow a selection, and I will associate my value list of not attending. Override data formatting with value list, that's fine in this particular case. I can't recall when I've turned that off. By default, FileMaker has it turned on. And the arrow is basically just that little item that you see right there on the end of the field. There's been very few times where I don't have that turned on. All right, go into browse mode, and we now have our value list. But herein lies our conundrum. Does it even make sense, since Matt Petrowski is already attending 2018 and 2019, does it make sense that I actually show 2018 and 2019? It does not. This is a situation where I want a filtered value list that is going to present only those options that I have remaining that are available to me. And the same would apply when I go to another record. When I go to Bob's record, which I just switched to with the command with control down arrow, control with up and down arrow will move you through your records. He should be able to see only one out of all of these, and that would be 2019. So that's our goal. But if we think about this as we're developing it, our goal might even go farther than that. This is both a historical account of the attendance of previous DevCons, but it can also apply to future DevCons. So in this lesson, we're not going to do this, but if I was developing this, if I was implementing the solution to this problem, my next question would be, why would I want to show 2016 and 2017 when the only thing that's going to be viable as an option is upcoming 2018 and 2019? And if he's already attending or specified to attend 2018, really the only option he would have would be 2019. You get the idea. So we have a really interesting problem here that can take us down a rabbit hole in terms of trying to solve this. And a lot of new FileMaker learners probably just say, forget it. I can't solve it. Give up. Just go ahead and give the user all the options and hope that they don't select duplicates. Now, there's two ways that you can prevent duplicates from happening. The first way is that you really don't give them the options in the first place. That would be my preferred method of preventing somebody from adding a duplicate if they just can't. The next option, and probably the solution that a lot of new FileMaker learners will choose, is within the context of what happens when you actually add the event, that's basically running a script, that's when you could basically determine, okay, do they already have 2016 selected or 2017? Is it already part of their selected events? If it is, or included events, then I'm just not going to have the script added. But that's not good user interface, is it? I mean, we would much rather have a filtered list which is only going to show the options viable to that user. So let's go fix our list and make sure that we're going to be able to solve this problem. And along the way, we're going to learn an important lesson. All right, so this is definitely going to deal with our relationship graph and with our value list. So as we go into our define relationships, this is where we get to start to ask some questions. The questions that we start to ask is, how do we find out, or how do we know what events a person is already attending? Well, hopefully the answer is coming pretty quickly to you because it's right in the middle of the screen. People are attending events based on their attendance, and their attendance is based on the context upon which we're actually operating. The context is always the layout that the user is on and what can be seen. So we are on the context of people. People can see what events a particular person is attending, and the events has the name or the values that we want to be able to select from. So if we think about this, the first thing that we might be thinking is, if attendees has the list of all of the currently attending events, according to a person, we might be able to do this. And let's go ahead and do this. Now I'm going to hold down the Option key and make a duplicate of the events. And what we're doing is we are now adding a table occurrence in order to facilitate a feature within the user interface. This is no longer dealing specifically with how we structure our data. This is also why I call FileMaker a giant mass of spaghetti. It's just everything gets intertwined, and without good organization, I promise you, your graph will become convoluted and complex. So if there's a ways that you want to identify that something is user interface versus pure data, then you're going to need to do that. Also, reflect on a previous lesson that I talked about where I showed you how to create custom value lists within a dedicated table called values, where you have self-relationships. Now that's only for custom values. In this particular situation, this value list is purely based on the context being what is the attendance of a particular person. So that's really the only place where I can actually get the values that I want to be able to display. So what is one of the ways that we will be able to show the events that a person currently is not attending? And hopefully what I just said gives you the clue, because every time that you're developing, when you ask the question, it sort of answers itself if you know about FileMaker's parts. And we've already talked about FileMaker's relationships. So when we look at the relationships, as we discussed in an earlier lesson, we have these. What is equal to, what is not equals to, any of these, what is within a range, or just give me everything. So what I just said is, what are the events that a person is not attending to, totally gave us the clue that we're going to use a non-equijoin in order to get our results. So let's work with that one. I just double-click that relationship. It's not the one that I want to connect, but I am going to connect something here between events 2, which I'm now going to rename, and attendance. So let's go with events here. Now here's how I like to start to name my table occurrences. I like to name them according to their functional use. And if I put in not attending, and then I like to use double chevrons. If you like to use underscores, double underscores, whatever, pipes, whatever you want to use as a separator, completely up to you. This is what I like to use. Some advanced developers who have had complaints against my particular naming say that this is a non-standard character and doesn't work within the world of SQL. If you're an advanced developer, my answer to you is yes, but I don't use my intra-FileMaker table occurrences and the way that I name them for my SQL operations. I actually create dedicated and separate table occurrences for my SQL select statements. So this does not bother me to use this little item. In fact, I like to see it because it allows, when I'm looking at a complex calculation, I can instantly see, oh, this longer string, this is actually coming from a table occurrence because of this double chevron. Now, if I click OK, FileMaker is going to say, uh-oh, you cannot do this. And you're going to find this with all of FileMaker's fields when you're naming them and table occurrences. Anywhere in FileMaker, if it can't resolve the name of things, because the names of things use mathematical operators such as and, or, XOR, not, or contains, well, those are the mathematical operators plus the logical operators, it just doesn't work. So here I sort of have to give in, and I'll just take the space off in this particular case, and I'll say not attending. So what I've done is I've described my table occurrence according to its functional use within the user interface and what it's going to be doing. And my first thought process would be, I need to go from attendees because attendees is actually storing the attendance and it's based on the event ID. So I'm going to go to the event ID. I'm going to wire those up, and then I'm going to double click this relationship and I'm going to switch it to a non-equijoin. And this might be the first thought process that a newer FileMaker learner is going to go through. Maybe you've done this yourself, and you might be thinking, aha, I've got the solution. My context is people. That's looking into the attendance for that particular person. And then that's going to look at the events that they are not attending, and it's going to actually show me a value list. So all we really need to do now is go switch our value list. So let's go do that. So as we zoom out here, we're going to head back into our Manage Value Lists. We're going to make one little change. Remember, it's always so nice to be able to go reflect on the graph, because this is where it gets really confusing for newer FileMaker developers. Picking where things come from and what the point of evaluation is, that's the most convoluted part of FileMaker, outside of making a script do what you want it to do. So we're still going to be using values from a field, but we are not going to be using all values. We are going to be using related values. So picking your starting point typically comes down to the two table occurrences and whatever's in between that provides the filter that gives you what you want. So first off, I started with events. So the question is, can I start from events now? Well, let's go to Manage Database and take a look. In Manage Database, if we go from this particular table occurrence, the filter is what are all of the events equal to the attendance of those events. That doesn't make sense. I intentionally set up a table occurrence with a non-equijoin. Now, I'm doing this improperly for a reason, so that we can see how FileMaker actually works. This is not the way that we're ultimately going to solve this problem. We are going to go from this table occurrence, and there's value in learning this too. We are going to switch this from not attending. We're going to need to do it for both of them, not attending, so that it's exactly what we need. We need to select the fields again. We always want to return our ID because that's what's going to go into our join table. The display value is from the name. And rather than including all values, we're now going to include only related values, and we're going to choose our point of origin. So the question comes down to now, point of origin. All right. My context, the layout that I'm working on, is based on people. But the data connection where events are actually attached to the attendance is coming from attendees. So which one do I choose? Do I choose attendees or do I choose people? Well, because this is actually an incorrect solution, and we're going to learn a lesson from it, it really doesn't matter which one you choose, but we're going to choose attendees. I mean, people may not give me what I'm actually expecting, but I know that the attendees table is probably the closest to what it might give me. It's what I might think where the data is. The data's in attendance or in attendees, and I want to get all of those values that are not equal to whatever they are currently attending, right? All right, so we'll go with that. So everything else looks good. Show values from field, and let's say okay, and let's say okay, and let's say okay. All right, so we're now at the point where we can test out our solution, and we're going to learn a very valuable lesson about FileMaker's relationships. In fact, this is probably one of the most valuable lessons that you can learn if you can get this into your head in terms of how FileMaker works. All right, so we're on Bob Smith's record, and Bob Smith is attending 2016, 2017, and 2018. What we want from our value list is only 2019, correct? When we make a selection, notice that 2018 and 2019 is shown, but 2016 is not shown. So that's very interesting. The list is sort of doing what we want to do, sort of, but not all the way. That's because it's presenting some of the options that we don't want. It's eliminating 2016, but it's not eliminating 2017 and 2018, and it is presenting 2019. And so now the question becomes, why? Why is it eliminating 2016 but not 2017 and 2018? Because he is attending these. And this comes down to the way that FileMaker evaluates through relationships, especially when you're more than one table away. Let's head back into the defined database. From the context that we are operating, which is on people, people can see in attendees, or in attendance, I'm calling it attendees, all of the records that that person is attending. And the portal is being displayed from this table occurrence on the layout based on this table occurrence. But the way that FileMaker's relationships work is it's only the first record as soon as you go more than one table away that FileMaker is ever going to see. So what we're getting is exactly what FileMaker is designed to do underneath the hood. We just don't know as FileMaker learners that we can't actually evaluate this type of value list from this context because our actual context is this. Otherwise, the only thing that FileMaker sees is the first record. So the first record of attendance for Bob is 2016. So when we non-equijoin to all of the events, FileMaker can only see, well, I can see that he's attending 2016. Let's take that one out, but all of the rest of them, I can't see that. It can only see this first record. So it dictates a total change in our thought process, and we have to go with what are known as FileMaker's multi-keys, and we have to shift things around in terms of how we're doing it. So we have to add yet more to our database system, and it's just one of the downsides in terms of how we get to our ultimate destination of presenting what we want to present. So let's do this the right way. In our fields, what we need is within people, we actually need to have a list of all of the events that this person is attending. So we need to add yet another field. This is where you get into just adding stuff to FileMaker just in order to facilitate the user interface. Not something I'm a fan of, but something that you have to do if you want to get to the solution that you want. So I'm going to create an unstored calculation. If you remember from a previous lesson where I talked about my naming convention, I want to know that it's unstored. So I'm going to call it unstored, and I'm just going to call it attendance. Is it ENC? I forget. It's probably ANC. I don't know. I'll just make whatever right now. Spelling is off, but we're just trying to learn a lesson. All right, so we are going to make this a calculation type of field. The reason that I know that it's going to be unstored is because we don't want it to be stored. We want it to be constantly whatever the current portal is saying for all of the events that this particular person is attending. All right, so we're going to create that, and we will zoom in. All right, so how do we get a list? How do we get a list? Let's get a list. So FileMaker's list function will give us a list of all of the events that a person is currently attending. Where are the attendance records stored? In the attendance. So let's look. Here is our context, people. Notice that we can select from any other table occurrence on the graph. Your starting point or your context is always important. We're on a layout based on the people table occurrence. That's our starting point. What are we looking at? We are looking into the attendees table. What is it that we need to know? The names of all of the events they're attending? No, the IDs of all of the events. So we are going to, is it the primary ID of the actual attendance record? Not the primary ID. It is the ID of the events that they are attending. And that's all we have to do right there. So this function of list is going to get a list of all of the specific events that this particular person is attending. Now we're going to need to switch this from a number to a text. And just for checking, we're going to click on storage options, and you can see what FileMaker already did. It automatically checked this box for me. I don't even have the option to uncheck it. I can try, but it will tell me that it cannot because it can't be unindexed, or it can't be indexed. So we now have a situation where we're ultimately going to be able to solve our problem. We're going to need to move a few things around, but let's take a look at what the field is showing us. I'm going to go into layout mode, and I'm going to scroll this out, go into browse mode, just so that we can see what's going on. Unstored attendance, our calculated field, should be grabbing the ID for DevCon 2016, 2017, 2018. It looks like it's doing that because this is one value and there's another value in there. I think there's 3 values in there. Let's wire up our true relationship that we should have now. In order to derive our value list, we now have a list of all of the values of the attendance of this person. And we can go into our defined database, or our managed database, into our relationships, and we can now move this equijoin. And this is the great thing about the graph. You don't have to make changes to our value list and to some of our fields or other things. You can come into the graph and just rewire things up. And FileMaker, as long as the path has been changed, but nothing has been taken away, things will they'll basically work. So as I hit delete on the relationship, in other words, I'm not going to delete this table occurrence. I know that I still want to connect to it. I just want to connect to it from the people table instead of the attendees table. So I'm going to select the relationship, hit delete and break the relationship, take this over to the people table. Now remember, I just do an arbitrary drag of anything here so that I can double click to reassign because I'm going to change the type of relationship. So what is it that we're looking at now? Well, it's the unstored calculated field that has the list of all of the IDs that the person is currently attending. Now I want to do the non-equijoin, meaning from this list of all of the events that they are attending, I want to look into the events table and give me a list of all of the IDs that they are not attending. And so, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the actual primary key. This is a list of primary keys. To the primary keys, give me all of the primary keys that are not the keys that are in attendance. So hopefully that makes sense. We're just flipping it on its head with this non-equijoin. So we click change on that. We've updated our relationship. We say OK. I'll collapse this. And now when we select from this value list, we have our solution. We have at least part of the solution. We have the solution where now what's happening is because of this multi-key field listing all of the keys that the user is attending, FileMaker has no other option other than using the non-equijoin to give me all of the events that they are not attending. We have, in essence, solved the problem, at least the first stage. If we want to go down the rabbit hole and we want to then make it actually work based on dates, we've got a lot more work to do. And I'll probably save that for a video in the future in terms of how we solve that. We have to add a date field. We have to start doing multiple predicates on relationships. And it probably won't fit into this more beginner advanced level that I'm talking about, but we can't get into that. In fact, maybe I'll shoot a video and I'll put it on the FileMaker magazine website. A great reason for actually subscribing. But as I move from one record to the next, what do I expect here? I expect to see 2016, 2017. There it is, 2016, 2017. I have my answer. I have my solution. I cannot add any other items. Now, what we're going to do next, probably, well, that would be in the scripting section where we actually add. But here's my suggestion for you as your course homework, if you'd like. Add your little plus icon. Because what you want to do now is you want to write a script so that a user can select 2016, click the plus icon, and then have that go into the attendance join table and make sure that you've joined or added that person to that particular event. That's where we're headed. But since we're at 30 minutes plus, I am at the point in time where we take questions, and I've done exactly what I intended to do, was explain how we can use these non-equijoins or the range operators with multiple predicates, although we didn't look at multiple predicates, in order to create a filtered value list based on the context so that we can actually present the type of user interface that we want. So we are going to head into, as I switch over to the question and answer time, see if anybody had any questions that came in. All right, there we go. Hey, everybody. Morning, morning. We have got a few little items here. Good morning. Hi. Connection is broken. Back. Thanks, Matt. Learned something valuable. New stuff today. Excellent. Thank you, Osteen and G8 Oscar. Looks like nobody had any questions for today. So it looks like that was a good explanation of how this works. Remember, the key when you're working within FileMaker is whenever you're thinking about your data and your structure and how do you get at the data that you want to get, always think in terms of starting and ending points. Where is the data that I want to get at? And where's the end point? And as we learned in today's lesson, even though the data that we want is in the attendance table, and we can get at it by getting to the events table, it wasn't in the right structure. So what we had to do is we had to create the right structure in order to ultimately get at the answer that we wanted. We had to add that extra field of the unstored attendance because that gave us a list of all of the keys that definitively that person was attending. And of course, when we go to the opposite of that with the non-equijoin, we get the exact answer that we're looking for. So while it takes a little bit of time and something that you get used to, it is something that you will learn. I'm confident of that. You watch these series, plus you learn more on my website, FileMaker Magazine. Again, if you're interested and you just found this video and you thought that it was helpful to you, you can give me a thumbs up. You'll be able to subscribe here in a few moments when I will show that. And you can always check out more content over at FileMakerMagazine.com. So with that, that's going to put this video at a wrap. I'll boot up my music here. Switch to the subscribe and let you know that if you want to be notified via YouTube or the YouTube app, you can click the subscribe, which will come up right here, and the next video in this series will be coming up right here. So until next time, much luck to you and happy file making. Bye-bye.